theyeshiva.net.
So the Gemara, the Talmud, records a fascinating debate about the order of lighting Chanukah candles. This is in Gemara in Maseches Shabbos, Tractate Shabbos, page 21b. The Gemara cites two opinions. One of the house of Shammai, the opinion of Beis Shammai, the school of Shammai, and the other is Beis Hillel, the school of Hillel. Now when we say Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, it literally means the home of Hillel and the house of Shammai. This doesn't mean the physical house. It represents two academies, two yeshivas, two centers of learning that were not just geographically in different locations. They were actually not far from each other, but they were different in their approaches, in their method, in their systems, in their way of thinking, in their way of interpretation. And these two academies of Shammai and Hillel played a very important role in Jewish history, because each of them included students of either the original Hillel HaZaken, or Shammai HaZaken. Now time here is very important, especially as we're going to be dealing with our Chanukah argument. Hillel was born in the year 110 BCE, before the Common Era, and he passed away in the year 10 after the Common Era. Just for those who are not so familiar with these numbers, the year 0, we are now in the year 2016, right? Almost 2017. What is it 2016 years of? What happened 2016 years ago? It was the year 0. Why did they start counting then? In the secular or Christian calendar, this is supposedly the year when Yashka, Oisei Ha'ish, Yeshua HaNotzri, was born. If he was really born mamish that year or around that time, that's a separate dispute. It's irrelevant to our discussion. But from his supposed birth, they started the calendar the year 0. The Beis HaMikdash was destroyed exactly 70 years later. In other words, in the year 70 after the Common Era. When we want to count the numbers in a secular calendar, we do after the Common Era and BCE, which is before the Common Era. Shammai and Hillel both lived around 100 years before the Churban of the second Beis HaMikdash. So Shammai was born in the year 110 before the Common Era, meaning 110 years before 0. And then there would be another 70 years till the Churban, so it's actually almost 200 years before that he was born. And Shammai was younger. Shammai was born 50 before the Common Era and passed away in the year 30 after the Common Era, which means 40 years before the Churban by Yeshemi. Both lived under Roman rule in the century before the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. They both lived less than a century after the Chanukah story. So when Shammai and Hillel speak about Chanukah, they're speaking about something that happened less than 100 years earlier, meaning they still have met people who were either there or were children of those that were there. They had intimate contact of the story, because it was less than a century before. The Chanukah story occurred in the year 165 before the Common Era. So Hillel and Shammai both lived less than a century after that story. Hillel was born 55 years after the Chanukah victory, and Shammai was born 60 years later. Now, they maintained opposing point of views in many areas of halacha, in many areas of Yiddishkeit. Yet Chazal say they argued with each other ferociously, but with a lot of reverence and a lot of respect. And they both developed schools. They both developed yeshivas. They both developed academies. Hence, we speak about Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. In fact, in Mishnayos and Chazal, we only have 3 recorded arguments between Shammai and Hillel. They themselves. All of the rest of the arguments, many, are between the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel. One common denominator one always notices is that Beis Shammai is more stringent and Beis Hillel is usually more lenient. In the Gemara we have more than 300 arguments recorded between them. One such argument is about Chanukah. Says the Gemara, Mahadri mina mahadri. Those who want to light Chanukah candles in the most beautiful and perfect manner, there is an argument. Hillel-Shamai says, Yom Rishon madlik shmoyne mekan ve'elech poiches v'hoilech. Hillel loimrim Yom Rishon madlik achas mekan ve'elech moise v'hoilech. The school of Shammai says, on the first night of Chanukah you light 8 candles. The second night of Chanukah you decrease, you light 7. The third night you light 6. And so you go down 5, 4, 3, 2. And finally, the 8th night of Chanukah, you fill up your menorah with 1 container, with 1 lamp of oil, and you light 1 candle. That's the view of Beis Shammai. The view of Beis Hillel is, no, the first night you light 1 candle, the second night you light 2, and so you increase each night another candle, and finally, on the 8th night of Chanukah, you light up your whole menorah. In other words, you have 8 candles burning. That's the argument between them. Asks the Gemara, what's the logic behind the argument? What would be the distinction between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? Why do we have to argue about everything? Everything is another reason to debate the machlokes. When it's a Jewish thing, nothing could be without an argument. How many candles? It's not so clear. You just lived a century ago. It just happened a century ago. We're still debating it. But why? What's the havana? What's the svara? What's the logic behind it? So the Gemara gives 2 separate ways of understanding the logic. The first is, Beis Shammai looks at the future, and Beis Hillel looks at the present. It's a very interesting argument. Beis Shammai speaks about Yomim HaNechnasim, the days that are yet destined to come. Beis Hillel says, no, Yomim HaYotzim. We look at the days that we already have or had. So the first night of Chanukah, Beis Shammai says, what do we have ahead of us? We had ahead of us 8 nights. The holiday of 8 days is beginning. So what do we light? We celebrate 8. With each passing day, 1 is gone. But what do you have left? The second night you have 7. The third night you have 6. Finally, the last night, what do you have left? You have left 1 night. Beis Hillel looks the reality, what you have now. Not what you have in store, not what you have in the future. Right now, Beis Hillel says, we live with the now. Tonight, I have 1 day. Tomorrow night, I had 1 day, and I have a second one. The third night, I have 3, and the last night, finally, I have 8 nights. It's interesting, the Gemara in Maseches Beitza records another argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about how to celebrate Shabbos. Beis Shammai says that when a person goes to the store on Sunday, and he or she sees a beautiful piece of fish or a nice piece of meat, he has to buy it or she has to buy it l'kavod Shabbos. This is for Shabbos. It's so beautiful, it's so delicious, it's so fresh, it's so geschmack. And then 7 days was still called fresh. It's l'kavod Shabbos. What happens on Monday? You go out shopping and you find a better piece of fish. So you say, okay, I'll eat yesterday's piece and this will be l'kavod Shabbos. And he says, this is how you do it. And that way, your whole week, you're preparing for Shabbos. Beis Hillel, the Gemara says, derech acheres hoysala. He had a different derech. He said, Baruch Hashem, yoim, yoim. Today is Sunday, let me focus on Sunday. What I buy today is for Sunday, Monday is Monday. When it comes to, I'll be ready. Friday, I'll prepare for Shabbos, I'll be ready for Shabbos. Baruch Hashem, yoim, yoim. That's one difference between them. Beis Shammai looks at what is in store. What is in store is 8 days, and with each night I'm missing that. And Beis Hillel looks not at the potential of what will be, but what is, or what was in reality. What did we celebrate in actuality? Which, as you can probably sense, this is a profound argument which deals with 2 ways of dealing with reality on many different levels. This is even, it translates into science, into psychology, into spirituality, into assessing yourself, into assessing people, into dealing with life. It's 2 approaches, not only about Chanukah, but about life. Then the Gemara gives a second explanation for their argument. A little more astounding, a little more enigmatic. It says, Beis Shammai says it's Keneged Porei HaChag. It parallels the system of Sukkos. On Sukkos in the Beis HaMikdash, they used to offer every day a special carbon But it was not uniform. The first day of Sukkot, 13 bulls. The second day, 12 bulls. In Parshas Pinchas, the Torah enumerates the list. In the third day, 11 bulls. And so each day of Sukkot, the number decreased. So you had 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. And then finally, the last day of Sukkot, the seventh day, what we call Hoshana Rabbah, you offered 7 bulls. You went down from 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. And then by Yom HaShmini Atzeret is the 8th day of Sukkot. Remember, ideally in Eretz Yisrael, we're dealing with an 8-day holiday, not a 9-day holiday. And the 8th day is Par Echad. It's one bull, it's a unique regal of announcement, it's a unique Yom Tov. So Beis Shammai says, Chanukah should be just like Sukkot. Just like Sukkot, you're going downward. Chanukah should be the same way. So when the Chazal instituted how to light the menorah, it was obvious that they emulated the system of Sukkot, what he calls Parei HaChag, the bulls of Sukkot. There it's 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Here it's 8 days. So we go 8 and 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Comes Beis Hillel and says, no, I disagree. Mailen b'kodesh ve'ein merid. The famous expression, when it comes to holiness, you ascend, you don't descend. You increase, you don't decrease. You add, you don't subtract. Mailen b'kodesh, you go up. Aliyah, from the word oila. You go up in kodesh, ve'ein merid, and you don't go down. So therefore, you don't go 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is meridin. You go mailen, you go up. Hence, Beis Hillel's view, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What would be a practical difference between the two ways how the Gemara understands the logic behind them? So this is a little bit of Talmudic thinking. So let's give an example, which of course Jews who learn Gemara come up with these examples constantly. I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody is standing the first night of Chanukah and they have one candle, Shana. The second night of Chanukah, they don't have one candle. They don't have 2 candles, they have only one. So what do they light? They light one candle. If you don't have 2, you light one. Now on night 3, somebody gives you 3 candles. So here's the question. How many candles do you have to light according to Beis Hillel? If you say the reason is Mailen b'kodesh, you have to go up in Kedusha. Last night I lit only 1, so tonight it's enough if I light 2. Why? Because I'm going up. But if you say the reason is because you're celebrating the days of Chanukah that passed already, tonight, if you have 3 candles, why are you lighting 2 candles? You shouldn't light 2 candles. You should light only 3 candles because it's the third night of Chanukah. This would be a practical difference of how you interpret the reasoning behind Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Or an opposite example. The first night of Chanukah, somebody has 1 candle. The second night of Chanukah, somebody has 2 candles. The third night of Chanukah, you only have 2 candles. What should you do? The third night of Chanukah, you only have 2 candles. Should you light 2 or not? You see the difference? If you say the reason you have to light 3 candles on the third night is because it's the third night of Chanukah, how can you light 2 candles? It's just giving an erroneous impression. Better light 1 and not 3. You don't have 3. Don't light 2, light 1. But if you say the reason is Mailen b'kodesh, ve'ein merid, you don't go down. So if the second night of Chanukah you lit 2 candles, the third night of Chanukah you're going to light 1. It's a pastachnish. You can't go down. So at least maintain the consistency, maintain the number, light 2 on the third night. That would be practical difference between the 2 ways how the Gemara understands the reasoning of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Don't worry, I'm stopping with this now, so it's fine. I see the left brains and the right brains here are going crazy, but it's but it's good for you to understand once in a while what your sons do for approximately 11 hours a day. Okay? It's good for you, so you should be able to empathize. You had it basically for 4.5 minutes, so you got away with murder. But some of them deal with this 11 hours a day. Now you understand, it's not so simple. Okay. They don't all have that brain. They don't all have that brain. Now, it's interesting, different audiences. Some audiences, if I would say this distinction, and then I would add another one, and then another one, and then another one, the smiles would grow more and more. And in other audiences, it's like, is this where this shiur is going today? Okay. So now, as you know, the halacha is like Beis Hillel. In most cases, the halacha is like Beis Hillel, although the Arizal says, interestingly, that la'asid lavei, when Mashiach comes, the halacha is going to be like Beis Shammai. Not only in this area, but in most debates between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, today the halacha is like Beis Hillel. And the reason the halacha is like Beis Hillel is not just a blind conviction, it's because all of the major debates were brought to a vote. The Torah, knowing that not every law is stated in the Bible, in Chumash or in Tanakh, and many situations will emerge that are not addressed in the original constitution, had to address this problem. How will Jews know what God wants in subsequent generations when new situations emerge that the Torah doesn't discuss? Or even new realities emerge that the Torah doesn't discuss? Or even realities that were there before, but the Torah did not legislate these details. And it understood that the sages who are interpreting the Torah, using their mind, will be debating things, will be disputing things, because everybody's mind works differently. Ein Deyaseh and Shabbos. So Moshe Rabbeinu gave in the Torah the formula of how to deal with debate, which is basically known as the pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim Achrei Rabim Lahatos, to follow the majority. So these debates were brought to the Supreme Court, to the Sanhedrin, for a vote. And the vote followed the majority. And in most of the arguments, the vote followed Beis Hillel versus Beis Shammai, and hence in most areas of halacha, although not all, the halacha is like Beis Hillel, not like Beis Shammai. The Arizal says that la'asid lavei, there's going to be a new vote by the Sanhedrin, and many of these halachas may be reversed, but the halacha is going to be like Beis Hillel, not like Beis Shammai, not like Beis Hillel. And that's why in every Jewish home, you will see the menorah being lit. The first night will have 1 candle, the second night 2, last night 3, tonight 4, and then finally the 8th night of Chanukah, 8 candles. We follow Beis Hillel, not Beis Shammai. Here, however, what we want to understand today is, understand better the view of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai also knows that there is something called reality, not only potential. But he looks at the future. Beis Hillel looks at the present. Why? And then in the second explanation, Beis Shammai looks at Sukkos. Beis Hillel also knows about Sukkos. Beis Hillel also knows that the holiday of Sukkos, the Torah says clearly to decrease. And yet he says, Chanukah is not Sukkos. Sukkos is Sukkos and Chanukah is Chanukah. It's true. They're both 8-day holidays. That's true. It's true. Megillas Antiochus, I believe, says that year they couldn't celebrate Sukkot because of the Greek-Syrian conquest, and therefore they made Chanukah 8 days to compensate for Sukkot that they missed. So there's an interesting parallel between the two. Nonetheless, Beis Hillel also knew about Sukkot. Why does Beis Shammai choose to focus on Sukkot? And Beis Hillel says you have to go up in Kedusha and not go down in Kedusha. Beis Shammai also knows that you should go up in holiness and not decrease. And yet Beis Shammai says it's irrelevant to here, or put it differently. If Beis Hillel believes that you have to go up in Kedusha, then one by Sukkot does the Torah say to go down. So you have proof here that sometimes you got to go down. In other words, both understood the view of the other. You're not dealing here with debates that come from ignorance. You see, there are two types of arguments in life. Many arguments in life come because simply one person doesn't begin to understand. So here's the issue. If we have to increase in holiness, why does the Torah tell us to decrease the number of bulls? So that means we don't always increase in holiness. Sometimes we decrease. So sometimes you have people debating each other because they think differently and they don't even understand the other view. I may be simply ignorant of facts. Many debates are based on ignorance of facts. I simply don't know what is happening in another person's life. I don't know all the data. And therefore, I disagree with you, I have my opinion. So some debates, they're not even communicating to each other. They're communicating really to themselves. I'm arguing with you, I'm not really arguing with you, because I don't even know you. I'm arguing with the you that I imagine is you, which has nothing to do with you, it has to do with me. So those conflicts are really harder to solve psychologically, but easier to solve objectively. Because if you would just be open to reality, and you wouldn't allow stereotype and bias to dominate the conversation, you could solve those debates in an easier way, those conflicts. But when you're dealing here with conflicts, when you say Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Khayyam, the Gemara says about Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel that God said both of their words are the words of the living God. So what do you mean? They're contradicting each other. So how can Hashem say the view of Beis Shammai and then say the view of Beis Hillel when the two views are mutually exclusive? This, of course, means that two truths sometimes may oppose each other, but they're not mutually exclusive. Because even though truth is truth, but there is truth for one person and there's truth for another person. It says in Zohar that Beis Shammai's souls came from Gvura. Beis Hillel's souls came from Chesed. Different types of souls. The truth of Chesed is a different truth than the truth of Gvura. One is not a lie, it's not falsehood versus truth. It's truth versus truth. Sometimes what is true for me is a lie for you. And sometimes what is true for you is a lie for me. We sometimes don't understand this, but it comes from a narrow-mindedness where we think that all souls have the same color. It's not true. Souls don't have the same color. Hearts don't have the same color. Psyches don't have the same color. So just because what is true for me is not true for you doesn't make it a lie for me. And just because what's true for you is not true for me doesn't make it a lie for you. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Khayyam. True, halacha l'maisa, I can only follow Beis Shammai or Beis Hillel. I can't the first night light both 8 and 1. Maybe in quantum mechanics you could. But in the reality of the observer, it's either 8 or 1. But I still must understand the concept, a truth that may not be the truth of my soul, but it's the truth of your soul. And generally, when people develop this approach in life, which is the basis of Torah Shebaal Peh, there's no way of learning Mishnayos and Gemara without understanding this, because there's just so many debates and conflicts. So either you think it's a chicken market of just people who love fighting with each other, or it's actually an expression of the infinite diversity that Judaism, in its majestic appreciation of infinite diversity, celebrates, and not only celebrates, but sanctifies and advocates, is expressed profoundly in the words of the Mishnah, Kol machloikas she l'shem shamayim soifel l'hiskayim, v'she'ena machloikas l'shem shamayim ein soifel l'hiskayim. Which means a debate for the sake of heaven will endure. A debate which is not for the sake of heaven will not endure. So there is the humorous interpretation. Any fight where you mix in God is going to last forever. Because the moment God is introduced, then nobody could compromise. Because it's not me, it's not me. It's not about me. And whenever you hear people saying, it's not about me. Really? Really? What is it about? Your Shviger? About your Alter Baba? Who is it about? It's not about me, it's about Hashem. Get suspicious. Because those machloikasin will never ever go. Because it's not me. If it was about me, if it's saying l'shem shemayim, okay, you give somebody a couple of dollars and shine they're quiet. That's a humorous interpretation. Maybe not so humorous, but it's an interpretation that has been said by Rabbi Yonis and Eibshitz, by others. Maybe on a different level or a deeper level. Kol machloikas shei l'shem shemayim soifel l'hiskayim. The only defeat which spells victory is when you're arguing for the sake of truth. Then to be defeated is a form of victory. If I'm arguing because I have an agenda, because I have a bias, because I'm looking for a particular conclusion in advance, because I just want to prove you wrong, then if I'm defeated, it's a defeat. But when I'm arguing for the sake of heaven, when I'm arguing for the sake of truth, then to be defeated is a form of victory, because the truth prevailed. So a machloikas that is l'shem shamayim is soifel l'hiskayim, because even the opposing view contributes to the clarification of truth. It contributes to the development of truth. And that's why when you're searching for truth, even if on the way you fall prey to falsehood, because that is part of your search for truth, that contributes to your conclusion. And since it contributes to your conclusion, that itself is part of the significant journey. Kol machloikas shei l'shem shamayim is soifel l'hiskayim. So when it comes to Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, and really all Machloikasin and all of Torah, one has to understand this. It's not, I wasn't listening to you. I was busy yelling, and therefore, I could not listen to your view. No. It came from a deep understanding of the other person's view. But nonetheless, the truth of my soul is not the truth of your soul. And God says both truths are the words of the living God. Elokim Khayyam. Then there's halacha. But Elu v'elu divrei Elokim Khayyam. And here we see a very interesting thing. The Gemara says that the reason that the halacha was established like Beis Hillel is because Noichin v'aluvin hayu. Beis Shammai really, they were sharper. Intellectually, they were sharper, and they were more analytical. So why did Beis Hillel prove victorious? In most of the votes, they won. So the Gemara says because Noichin v'aluvin hayu, they were more pleasant, and they were more sensitive. V'loi oid ela shemagdimin divrei Beis Shammai l'divrei Beis Hillel. They used to always quote their opponents before they quoted themselves. So in a discussion, they would say, the school of Shammai holds like this. We hold like this. And that's why throughout all of Shas, most cases, you will always have Beis Shammai quoted before Beis Hillel. Why? First of all, Shammai was younger than Hillel. Number two, the halach is like Beis Hillel. Shouldn't we quote Beis Hillel first? The answer is because Beis Hillel would always quote Beis Shammai first. That's why the way it's recorded is always Beis Shammai comes first and then Beis Hillel. The question is, these qualities represent and demonstrate humility, sensitivity, kindness. What do they have to do with the verdict of law? The verdict of law should follow the more rigorous mind, not the more pleasant and sensitive person. The answer, of course, is that the two are interdependent upon each other. Because only when I could understand my opponent's view, and I can even quote his or her view before my own, then I can trust my own view. Because then I have an opportunity to really sharpen my view against another view. And that's why arguments, debates, disputations, disagreements are so vital for a free society and for a society that prospers. Because whenever I maintain opinions and I don't know what the opposite opinion believes, I could never be certain that my opinion is coming from a deep realization, or maybe it's just coming because of indoctrination, because of dogma, because of no thought process. But when I can hear another person's view which disagrees with me, and then I could say, that's good, that's interesting. And not being threatened and the need to attack, but actually considering it, mulling over it, chewing over it. Now I have an opportunity to crystallize my own view. Which is why, for example, in a spousal relationship, when a spouse disagrees, it's reason for celebration. That's why the pasuk says, "Lo toiv heyos ha'adam levadai," which means it's not good for man just to have his own opinions. Eseloi ezer kenegdoi, which literally translated, the greatest help I could do for Adam is kenegdoi. Somebody who says, "Darling, you're out for lunch." Kenegdoi. Somebody who says, "Un efshe fakert." Maybe it's the other way around. They say that there was once a wealthy fellow, who took a son-in-law for his daughter, and the son-in-law had this reputation of being this great Talmid Chacham. Anyway, Friday night, he comes to the Shadchan and he says, I'm afraid you and I know the truth about me. Ich weiß gar nicht, ich bin ein Idiot, I know nothing. At the conversation, I'm going to have to impress my father-in-law. What do I do? He says, it's not a problem. Your father-in-law is a narcissist. So he doesn't even like listening. He just wants to hear himself. All he needs is somebody should say something so he could prove him wrong, which is what a narcissist does. So while he's giving his divrei Torah, every few minutes just say, un efshe fakert. And maybe it's the other way around, and everything will go. Okay. So the father-in-law starts saying his brilliant words of Torah at the meal, between the fish and the soup. And the son-in-law starts scratching his forehead and says, un efshe fakert. And maybe it's the other way. He says, psst. You mean this and this Tosfos? But I'll answer you. And he gives a whole answer. And he says, un efshe fakert. You mean the Rashba disagrees? Psst. And so the whole meal was going, and every few seconds he was on efshe fakert, and the father-in-law was in the heavens. He was in ecstasy. And finally he gives a scream, he calls in his wife, he says, Zagon, such a brilliant genius, where could you find this? Such a perfect man. He says, and maybe it's the exact opposite, you know. He was doing his thing and he was doing his thing. But that ability to be able to hear somebody who looks at me and says, and maybe it's the exact opposite, and maybe you're making a mistake. So if I'm insecure, and if I'm addicted to indoctrination, and all I want is to hold on to the shackles that tie down my brain, the worst thing I can hear in my life is somebody says, I disagree with you. Either I run from them, or I attack them, or psychologically I have to excommunicate them. Because there's no way to deal with it. But if I'm in a more of a wholesome and godly space, gewaldig, now you'll give me an opportunity to ask myself, how deep is this view? How deeply held is this conviction? How profound is it? How thought out it is? So this is really what Yiddishkeit is based on. A culture of debate in order to arrive at a deeper truth. And that's why the Gemara is so full of arguments nonstop, and it looks very strange. It looks strange. It's like they don't stop fighting and debating about everything. But the truth is that it's a machloikas l'shem shamayim for the sake of truth. And all of these types of debates, all of these types of conflicts are not only good, they're vital, they're productive, they're meaningful, because it allows you to see the contrast. And you never falter, you never melt away. Why? Because if they're wrong, adirabba, show me how they're wrong, and then the rightness will be far clearer. And if they're right, adirabba, if they're right, then my defeat spells victory. So this is true about every machlokes. That's why the reason the halacha is like Beis Hillel is, because they listened to Beis Shammai. And they quoted them first. It actually made their view far more thorough, far more comprehensive, far more profound. Which derech agav, by the way, sometimes youngsters have questions, different types of questions. And many of us, with good intentions, probably with very good intentions, our approach to questions is, we look at the person, we look at the teenager, we look at the young woman, we look at the young man, and we say, we don't ask questions. By us, we don't ask questions. Now, they are saying, of course, what their father or mother told them when they asked their questions. And they're saying what they were told when they asked their question. So now there's two approaches. What do you do when you hear that? One is you learn never to ask a question again, if you want to fit in. But there's other people who say, that means there's no answer. That means there's no answer. And even the person who will never ask a question again knows that there's no answer deep down. Because if there was, why do you have to scream at me? So sometimes, when a teenager asks a question and his teacher or mentor screams at him, sometimes with a lot of anger. What's fueling the anger is not the question. What's fueling the anger is that he has the same question. But the way he dealt with it many, many years ago was through repression. And now, how dare you bring up in me a skeleton that I thought I got rid of? So I'm really not screaming at you. I'm screaming at the part of me that made me so uncomfortable, and I had to cut it out of my system in order to be who I am. In other words, you're reminding me that I'm a liar. And I've been lying my whole life. That's very, very upsetting. So the poor child thinks that he's being screamed at or she's being screamed at. And really they're dealing with a person who didn't fully come to terms with themselves. They're not really honest with their religion. A much deeper and healthier and Jewish way of dealing with it is, I'm talking here not about unhealthy cynicism where a person is just trying to mock. I'm talking about a person who's inquisitive, a person who has real questions. The world is a place with a lot of questions. Olam, the Gemara says, is milashon helam. Olam comes from the word concealment. God is concealed in this world. And whenever something is concealed, there's questions. So therefore, a much godlier approach, a Jewish approach is that a person looks at the question and says, if I know an answer, I'll share it. I may not know. And I could say, I don't know an answer to that question. I have to ask somebody. Or let's go talk to somebody who may know. Or let me research it. Of course, some things are not answerable. But many things are, even if they're not answerable, there's discussion, there's conversation. Even understanding why it's unanswerable is also a profound awareness. Even understanding why something is unanswerable. So therefore, the concept is when people are secure and confident, they're never afraid of questions, ever. They may have an answer, they may not have an answer, but they're not afraid of the question. They're not terrified by the question. There's no like silent demon that's hiding that they always have to cover up for. And when there is, youngsters feel it immediately. And the way this turns them off in a very deep way is very, very profound. I was not long ago at a Shabbaton, and we were discussing this. So a young fellow, a fine Hasidic man from a particular community, started to get very upset at me. And he said that he also had these questions. He also had some questions, and he shared the question, and he told them to his father when he was 11 or 10 or 13. And his father screamed at him terribly. His father says, "Das was Schkotzen fragen das, Goyim fragen das, Maskilim fragen das," but all his, some more words I'm not going to get into. Jeden fragen es nicht. Und jeden fragen es nicht. Jews don't ask it. So now he was screaming at me. And there was a big crowd also. So I looked at him and I said, now I'm going to ask you to put your hand on your heart and answer me very, very honestly. As a result of your father telling that to you, did the questions disappear? Because Yidden haben nicht das solche Shailas. And you're a Jew. So to be a Jew means you don't have these questions. So did the questions disappear? Tell me the truth. Or you just never dared to bring them up again because the abuse was too painful. Tell me if the questions are not there anymore. So he looks, he takes a deep breath, and to his credit he says, the questions are only bigger. So I said, look at what your father accomplished. He had good intentions, I'm sure he's a wonderful man. But he didn't think it through so well. Let me understand something. Let me explain something. If a child has a question, a girl, a boy, I'm talking any age, of course you can't compare a question of a 4-year-old to a question of a 14-year-old to a question of a teenager, which today I think is 6, to a question of a 19-year-old and so forth. But if somebody comes and asks me a very big question, when they came with the question, in their mind, they probably think 50% of the chance, 50% he has an answer, 50% he doesn't have an answer, or maybe 40, 60, or 70, 30, whatever it is. When I scream at him and I say, we don't ask such questions, now he knows 100% is no answer, not 50. So instead of giving him more emunah, you know what I did? I gave him more kfira, more heresy. I'm trying to give him more emunah. All I told him is, 100%, we have nothing to say about this. There's no way we can defend it. They say that there was once a particular type of Rebbe, who didn't speak at the tish ever. He would sit and sing and give cake and then herring and then whatever they give, sponge cake. He never said anything. Ever, never a word. Once he turns to the Gabbai and he says, what does the Olam say about me? So he says, so do people think I'm a Talmud Chacham? He says, some people say you're a big Talmud Chacham, and some are skeptical. Okay. 6 months later he says, Ni vazag da olam vegemir. What do they say? He says, I told you, yesh v'yesh. He says, what? He says, a lot of people are starting to say you have nothing to say. You really know nothing. So, if I may make a suggestion, maybe this Shabbos, if the Rebbe can have a zugim am tish, if the Rebbe could say something by the tish just to dispel the notion that you're an ignoramus. So he says, how many people think I'm an ignoramus? Is it 40%, 50%, or more? He says it's 50% of the people. He said, if so, I'm going to stay quiet. He says, why? He says, because if I open my mouth, then the other 50% will reach the same conclusion. At least if I'm quiet, I can keep 50% guessing. So if this is the case, if this is a situation, we have to understand what we do when we dismiss, reject somebody with a question. All we do is we don't dismiss the question. We don't cleanse from the question. We make it more entrenched forever. And now when they're 40 or 50, they already for 30 years are convinced there's no answer. Yeah? And then they come to Rabbi YY's shir, and he addresses the question, and suddenly I could see the cynicism and the anger and the pain flowing all over, flowing from their brain, from their mouth, and they scream at me. They scream at me, and the worst thing I could do is take it personal, because it's like a shake-up of so many years of dealing with a Judaism that has to remain shrouded in strange, ignorant mystery, because people don't understand that God equals infinity, and that Judaism is about infinite openness, not infinite repression. It's exactly the other way around. But this creates a very profound challenge. So now you'll ask me, what happened with Emunah? Emunah is never threatened by intellect. Emunah transcends intellect. Emunah that's threatened by intellect is not called Emunah, it's called a cult. It's called a cult. People in cults are threatened by conversations. Because if you're going to ask me something that I don't know, you may disprove my cultish beliefs, and therefore I say, we don't discuss things, we just believe. If all of Judaism is based on that, then if I would have grown up in a Muslim home, it would have been exactly the same thing. So how can even one begin to talk about truth? Emunah is never threatened by intellect. Rather, intellect takes you to where it can take you, and it has to take you there. A mind is an infinite divine gift. The mind takes me and should take me wherever the mind can take me. But the mind must also appreciate its limitations. There is a doorway that the mind can take me to, and then the mind says, I cannot pass through this doorway because some reality is beyond mathematical equations and intellect. And here is where Emunah comes in. Emunah is like the sixth sense of the soul. Emunah is a skill. It's a skill that when cultivated allows you to experience ultimate reality. Not to understand ultimate reality, but to experience ultimate reality. So, therefore, the culture of debate is essential to Judaism. Elu v'elu divrei Elokim Khayyam. Now, we come back here to Chanukah. If so, let's understand the two truths that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are espousing, even though they each listen to the other one. It's not coming from ignorance, it's because there are two perspectives. What are these two perspectives? And they're both true, and yet the halacha is like Beis Hillel. Okay, you with me? So, I'm going to tell you, although I'm going to develop it in my own words, Be'ezer Hashem, I want to tell you where I first came across the nucleus of the idea, and it inspired a whole array of thoughts. There was a Jew, I just have it written here, his name. There was a Jew who lived in Vancouver. He was the rabbi of Vancouver, which is British Columbia. He was a Talmud Muvak, a dedicated student of the Khayyam, Rabbi Yisrael Meir HaKohen Kagan in Radin, who passed away in 1933. This man's name was Reb Chaim Ber Ginsburg. Reb Chaim Ber Ginsburg also headed a yeshiva in Lodz in Poland. Ultimately left when there was time, arrived to the US in 1941, and became the rabbi of Vancouver, the Kehillah of Vancouver. And he was a real student of the Khayyam. He passed away in the early 60s, 1962. And he was, I believe, 70 years old. There's a very interesting correspondence from the 1940s when he arrived to America and he went to Vancouver between the Lubavitcher Rebbe and this man, Rabbi Chaim Ber Ginsburg, the Talmud of the Chofetz Chaim. And in one letter from Chanukah time, 1943, there's a long exchange between them about this conversation, this discussion. And in this exchange of letters, very interesting ideas emerged. And I'm going to share with you one idea that the Lubavitcher Rebbe shared with Reb Chaim Ber Ginsburg, the Talmud of the Chofetz Chaim, about this argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Briefly, it has to do with this question. How does one deal with the anxieties, the stress, the inner tension, turmoil, and darkness that people have within themselves? The pasuk says, "Ein tzaddik ba'aretz asher yaseh tov v'lo yechta." There's no man, there's no human being, there's no tzaddik in the world that's not lacking something. Yechta doesn't only mean doesn't sin. The real word of chet is not sin. You know what chet means in Hebrew? Avoid, right? What does it say about Shaul HaMelech, the way he shot arrows? Koileya el ha'sa'ara v'lo yechta. He always hit the target and he never misses. Yechta means, Bathsheba tells David HaMelech, you remember Tanakh? Malachim? V'hoyu ani uvni shlomo chatoyim. Chatoyim doesn't mean we'll be sinners, we will be missing. Chet is a void. And it's a much more accurate translation than a sin. Because when I tell you it's a sin, okay. If I tell you it's going to create a void, now you said something. When I told you it's a sin, you feel like a helpless victim. When I tell you it's a void, now you're a partner in the journey. You can do it, but it's going to create a void in you. A chet is really a void. A void. When I can speak about chatoyim in terms of voids, and what's the definition of a mitzvah? The opposite of chet. So we translate a mitzvah as a commandment. The Gemara, however, says the word mitzvah in Hebrew doesn't mean commandment. It means commandment, it also means something else. Tzafsa means a link, a connection. So mitzvah means to connect. Chet means a void. You create an openness. Chilul Hashem, how did they translate it in school? Desecration, but it's not the translation. Chilul comes the word chalol. What's chalol? Empty space. Chilul Hashem means you believe that there's a space that's empty of Hashem. That's Chilul Hashem. Chilul Hashem means you create a chalol. V'lo yisechalalu Hashem kachi. Don't create an empty space where you believe that God is not present. All chet comes from the fact that I don't feel that Hashem is with me and in me and filling my life at every moment completely. I create a chalol. I create an empty space. Therefore, a desecration of Hashem really, in a deeper way, means you're creating a hole. You're creating a void. But those voids exist in a person's life. What is the approach to this? Generally, the Tehillim says, Sur meira v'asei toiv, bakei shalom v'ratfeyu. Mi ha'isha chafetz chayim, etzor l'shan chameras v'sechav v'damim. Sur meira means go away from Ra. And what does Ra mean? How do you translate Ra? They translate Ra in school. Bad. Really doesn't mean bad. Ra means broken. In Gemara, kaisel ra'ua means a broken wall. It's shaky. Right? In Koheles it says, I saw everything. Remember Koheles? Everything under the sun. Hakoil hevel u're'us ruach. It's fragmented from ruchnius. When you believe you're broken, that's Ra. The greatest Ra is when you feel that you're broken. You're not whole. You look in the mirror and you say, I'm a broken nobody. I'm a kaisel ra'ua. I'm worthless. That's the source of Ra. Why do you feel broken? Because you're not one with infinity. Infinity is always wholesome, because the Ein Sof pervades everything, so nothing is broken. Infinity encompasses all. Whenever I'm part of infinity, I can't be broken. How can I be broken? If I'm part of the whole, why am I broken? But when I say God is not here, in other words, Hillel-Shamai, so now I'm broken, and now I actually become a fragmented person from my own perspective. Tshuva doesn't mean repentance, tshuva means return. Return to that space where you're not broken, you're wholesome. All these translations say the same idea, but they say it in a way that speaks to a person's soul, to a person's richness, to a person's imagination, to a person's understanding that a mitzvah versus a chet is not about repression versus obligation, but it's about an opportunity to be connected rather than to be broken and fragmented. So it's really a very internal journey. So what happens first? Sur Meira or Asay Toiv? What happens first? This was a big argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And it expressed itself in one more debate. The Gemara says in Ksuv, it's a very strange debate. Keitzad meragdin lifnei hakala. You remember the song? Keitzad meragdin lifnei hakala. How do you dance before the kala? Interesting machlokas. So the song, they decided to delete one opinion. That's why you're not going to know what I'm going to say now. But if you look up the original Gemara Ksuvas, page 17, it's there. Beis Shammai Yoimrim, Kala Kamois Shehi. Every Kala you praise according to who she is. Machnish Ken Baba Maisis. Talk about who she is. Don't start making me resumes of Chaloim L'Shacholmu Achedim Al-Achedim by the Shatchin, which is Rosh Hashanah, Sheker, Doiver, Kesef, Noitel. Speaks lies and takes money. Say the truth. Kala Kamois Shehi. Beis Hillel says, no, it's not going to work. We need a generic nusach for everyone. Kala Nova Chasuda. She's beautiful and she's gracious. Chasal Sida Pesach. So Beis Shammai turns to Beis Hillel and says, doesn't the Torah say you're not allowed to lie? What if she's not mamish atzatzke? What if she's not mamish a krasavitze? Some of your grandmothers would say. A few people know the word, okay. Depends what type of grandmother you had. What if she's not mamish kalanova chasuda? Let's put it this way. Beis Shammai says, what are you lying? Find something else. Find something else. You can always come up with something. Her cheese blintzes are one of a generation. The chaluptzes that she makes, unbelievable. Abalabaste mehoidu v'atkush sheva meyavesem b'sheva. You'll find something. Beis Shammai says, why are you lying? So what does Beis Hillel say? If your spouse goes to the store and buys an outfit and comes home and asks her husband, is it beautiful or horrible? What does he say? He says it's horrible, he says it's beautiful. Unless he wants to go out with a head shorter. He says, of course it's beautiful. It's exactly what I thought you should get. That's what Beis Hillel answers. As the Rashash said, it's only if she can't return it. If she could, you have to say the truth. Okay. So it's a funny argument. Beis Shammai says you're not allowed to lie. Beis Hillel says everybody lies. People give compliments, they don't mean it, they don't think it. So that's why you're allowed to lie? What's the nature of the argument? The truth is that there's a profound argument here. But I want to take the argument, and Likutei Torah explains the argument on a spiritual level. Kala refers to a soul. Every soul is in a state of kala. Kala comes from the word klois hanefesh. Yearning, nichsefa v'gam kol sonafshi, l'chatres beis Hashem, libi uvsari yiranu el kelchai. Kala is yearning. Kiloyon means yearning. Every soul yearns. But ketzad merakdin. Merakdin means to dance. Merakdin in Hebrew also means to what? To sift. Meraked. Because when they used to sift flour, you ever saw your Alta Baba? They would dance. Today, chas v'shalom to do these things. You just go to the hotel. But when they used to sift the flour, it was a dancing mode. So rikut, but really the truth is much deeper. When you dance, what you try and doing is, dancing is a form of sifting. You sift out the bran. It's like a sieve. You sift out the bran, the sediments, from the flour. That's why dancing, spiritually and psychologically, is a very therapeutic thing. Because when you dance in an unconscious way, not self-conscious, there's people who dance, it's part of their resume. That's not dancing, that's depression. But people who dance and they let go when they dance, without thinking too much about who they are and who they're not, they're actually allowing themselves to be sifted. Ketzad meraktin lifnei hakala. The kala needs to be sifted. How do you do it? Beis Shammai says, kala kamois shehi. You have to evaluate who you are in a brutally honest way, and you got to confront every demon, every skeleton, every ghost, every fear, every insecurity. Don't even begin without this. There's no sifting if you don't confront exactly who this neshama is with everything. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Beis Hillel says, no. Kala nova chasuda. You have to look at a neshama, you have to look at yourself, and you have to say you're beautiful and you're gracious. What's the argument there? It's a very deep argument. Beis Shammai says, if you ignore stuff, they will remain there. If you don't deal with them, they will remain there. You must confront everything. You don't bring in the beautiful furniture into a house if the house is full of dirt. You say, we're ignoring the dirt. You'll bring in couches, you'll bring in your kitchen set, you'll bring in your dining room table, you'll bring in the art. But you know what's going to happen? Somebody's going to pick it up one day and say, Alts fashimmelt, it's all rotten. Beis Shammai says, Sur Meira always precedes Asay Toiv. You got to confront the bull by its horns and deal with it. That's how it works. Once you clean up and commensurate to how much you clean up, you'll bring in the light of the Kala. Beis Hillel says, this will not work for most people. And the reason it won't work for most people is, first of all, people can get stuck there. People can get stuck in their darkness. They analyze themselves more and more and more, so now they understand everything about why they have this and why they have that, and 50 years later, they're still analyzing themselves without a day of spunk, light, clarity, or joy. People can get stuck there, Hillel says. He says, not everyone is capable of making their journey and getting out on the other side. Darkness is a maze, and skeletons are a wide, winding maze, and demons have a tend to be inconsistent. And you think you reach the other side and you're just stuck somewhere in the middle. That's one thing. Beis Hillel says another thing is a person could discover so many things, they get into a depression. They lose their motivation. They end up with a recognition of despair. Everything is bad. And what did you do? You accomplished nothing. So Beis Hillel says, for these and other reasons, that's not the approach. You have to start off and say, Kala nova chasuda. There is tremendous beauty in you. There's tremendous kindness in you. There's tremendous light in you. Because that is true, Beis Hillel says. It may be buried. It may be inaccessible. It may be buried behind lots of layers of toxicity. But the Yesodus of Yiddishkeit is, don't make a Chilul Hashem. Don't believe that you are a void. You're not a void. There is a void in you. So if you can discover the wholesomeness in you, you can access it, you can identify it, you can accentuate, begin with that. When you begin with that, what you accomplish is, the person is not focused on their negativity. They're focused on their beauty, on their splendor, on their goodness, on their holiness. And they don't get stuck. And Beis Hillel says, and the more you do that, the more that positivity will ultimately dispel the darkness. They say a Maisa, very deep story. The Baal HaTanya came to study by the Maggid of Mezrich, his Rebbe. The Maggid of Mezrich had a son whose name was Rabbi Avram HaMalach, Rabbi Avram the angel. You can understand what type of person he was, that they called him an angel when he was alive. It's not like a woman who told her friend, my man is a malach. And the other one started to cry and said, I know what you mean, mine is euch nicht kemensch. Mine is also not a human being. You know, there's a malach and there's nicht kemensch. They're both not people. But the question is why? Okay. Chayes HaKodesh could mean malachim and could mean Chayes HaKodesh, holy cows, holy animals. So it depends. It's both Chayes HaKodesh. Now the truth is one Chayes comes from the other Chayes, but it's a separate parish. So he used to learn, they were Chavrusas, the Baal HaTanya was a Gon, Oilam would learn with Rabbi Avram HaMalach, and they would learn for many hours, they would learn 6 hours a day for a long time. The Balatanya had to go home. His wife gave him permission to go for a while, and it was time to go home. So he comes to the coach, to the Balagola, he had whatever he had over there, and he's looking at the horse. He's looking at the horse that's going to take him home from Mizrich, which is in the Ukraine, to his city. He lived in Lyozhna, which is Belarus. It's a mahalach, it's a nasiya. I mean, today it's not a far nasiya, but then it was a shtickle nasiya. From the Ukraine to Belarus. He's looking at the horse. So the Bavram HaMalach is out there, and he looks at the Balatanya, and he says in Yiddish, he says, Far, guck nicht auf the Pferd. You go and go, don't look at the horse. So the Alter Rebbe said, he has to stay here longer to internalize the message. He can't go home yet. What did he say? He was telling him something in Avodas Hashem. In an ideal world, everyone has an animal in them, a nefesh abahamis. Everyone has a ferd in them, a horse. Now a horse has a lot of milas. A horse has tremendous milas, but a horse could sometimes also be a horse, especially when it gives you a kick. There was once a Polish tzaddik, he was on a train, and he met a Jew, says, Shalom Aleichem, was tut ihr? And the Jew says, Ich handel mit Pferd. I deal with horses. So the Rebbe says, Punkt wie ich. Just like on me. So sometimes you look at the horse and you scrutinize it and you analyze it and you dissect it. And in the meantime, you become paralyzed. He said, Far, guck nicht auf the Pferd. You have to go. You can't always stay stuck and say, but I'm this and I'm so full of problems and I hate the world and I'm jealous and I'm insecure and my mother and my father and my brothers and my sisters and my marriage and the shviga and the elter shviga and the elter baba and the world and the community and the yeshiva and everyone is against me. Somehow God chose me to be the damned enemy of society. I could never have it good. Everything is a problem. And you know what? Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, maybe you're exaggerating. But where are you? You're stuck in a dark place. Far. You have to acknowledge always that under all circumstances is a state of you that is well. Well-being is not conditional, it's not circumstantial. It's a condition that is permanent. A person's core is indestructible. There's a space in you which is noeh v'chasuda. It's wholesome, it's beautiful, it's confident, it's optimistic, it's joyous, and it's fearless, and it's secure. Because since it's a chelik eloka mimal, the soul is a part of Hashem, just like Hashem is invincible. There's a part of you that's invincible. And just like God doesn't need compliments to make him, and criticism doesn't break him, the same is true on that level of your soul. This doesn't mean there's nothing else. It means identify with it, and live from that space, even though there's a lot of other issues going on. And that itself will help you slowly reduce the darkness less and less and less. Beis Shammai says it's delusional. This is fluff psychology. This is inspirational stuff. It's not the real thing. We got to go into the thicket of things. You could see here Beis Shammai. Who's right? We say, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Khayyam. There's no right and wrong. We know Beis Shammai's point very well. And yet the halacha is like Beis Hillel. Not because Beis Shammai is not saying the truth. He's saying the truth. But it's a very profound truth. And sometimes the halacha comes from the word what? We translate halacha as law. But what's the real translation of halacha? Movement. How many people associate psychologically law with movement? Think about it. Halacha al tikre halachas ella halichos. Don't say halacha, say halichos. If you don't see halacha as an impetus for movement, you don't understand the halacha. We translate halacha as rigid, law. Tarnished. Really, it's a form of movement. It's a form of expansiveness. Again, it's all about translations. They create shifts in the brain. So, halacha is like Beis Hillel. I'll tell you a story I heard from the person it happened with, which I think illustrates it in a profound way, and then we'll be able to come back and Hashem bring it together. There's a Jew whom I know, his name is Rabbi Manis Friedman, who heads a school in St. Paul, Minnesota, called Beis Chana. It was, I think, the first yeshiva was created in the 1960s, late 1960s, for young Jewish women who wanted to return to Yiddishkeit. After the whole hippie era, anti-establishment movement in the 1960s, many people became Balei Tshuva, both men and women, so yeshivas opened up, etc. And this was a yeshiva in Minnesota, a school, like a seminary, not a seminary, like a yeshiva for girls or young women that came. So I heard from him this story. He says there was a young woman there who was having a lot of social issues. And it was already, she wanted to get married, and her dating was very, very complicated. And she came to speak to him one day. And she says she's been in therapy for years and years and years. And the greatest of the great psychologists, psychiatrists, diagnosed her as being a narcissist. And they explained to her why she's a narcissist. She became a narcissist as a child to protect herself. The world wasn't here for her. So she had to become a narcissist, because sometimes you're the only one who can protect yourself and you can't even acknowledge anybody else's existence, because if I acknowledge your existence, that could mean a threat to my existence, and therefore the safest way to live is everybody is a mirror. Everybody is here for me. As they say, the famous joke, if you want to drown a narcissist, you put mirrors on the bottom of the ocean. Okay. Or somebody once told me about a particular individual, he said he's a self-made man and he worships his creator. So, she was having a lot of challenges, and nothing was helping. All the advice, garnish. So he suggested, Rabbi Manas Shriven is a Chabadnik, so he said, why don't you go visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe in New York and share with him the problem? I said, okay. She takes a flight, she goes to New York, and she schedules a yechidus, an appointment with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, which would usually happen in the middle of the day. You would see people during the night, throughout the night. And she comes in with a report, 60 or 80 pages, that she had professionals write up on her condition. And she hands it to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So he takes the papers. Now he was a speed reader, but not Stam speed reader. I mean, I've seen it myself. He read literally, he could read a page in 2 or 3 seconds, and it was fascinating. I don't know exactly how he did it, but the amount of mail he got, he had to do it. So I don't know if he learned it, how he learned it, I'm not so familiar with it, but he was mamish a speed reader. So he takes the paper, and he goes like this, puts on his glasses, and he goes page by page, slowly, scans through the page. So she thought he's being polite, you know. Sometimes a person gives me an article of 100 pages, they say, you have to read it, So I'm like, yeah, sure. Seems brilliant. So she thought he was just being polite, but it was a strange thing, because he went through the whole thing, like this. He finishes, and he turns to her, and he says, so what's the problem? So she says, you read it? You have to read it. It's very serious. He says, I read. I don't understand the problem. He says, what do you mean you don't understand the problem? Obviously you didn't read it. He says, I read it. She says, don't you see my history, my mother and my grandmother and my aunt and my father and my brother, this addiction, this house, that house. And because of... He says, no, that's your history. I understand your history. I want to know what's the problem now. She says, the problem now is I'm narcissistic. I think only about myself. She says, so stop thinking only about yourself. This is what she came for. Stop thinking like this. She says, I have an issue. You see who I was and how I became. He said, I know how you became. But I'm saying if you want to change, so start thinking about other people. So she looked at him. She says, let me tell you what to do. You study in Beis Chana. How do they serve dinner, or with breakfast or lunch? So they have a counter or smorgasbord. They set up the food. You take a plate and a fork, and you take your food, and you go to your table. So he says, when you come back at the next meal, go over to the girls sitting at one table and ask every one of them, can I bring you something from the counter? They'll look at you, but somebody will say, I need a spoon, a fork, more chicken, more rice, more vegetables, more napkins, a drink. He says, no, I can't do that. I don't do that. He says, if you want to think about other people, this is what you do. You ask people what they need. So she argued back and forth. This is what I suggest you to do. And then you'll see that you're not a narcissist. She listened. Rabbi Friedman told me she went back, and it was so awkward for her, because in her perception, she doesn't think about people. That's who she is. She is the sick, dysfunctional, self-centered, insane narcissist. So she starts doing it. The girls are a little, But fine, if somebody offers me to bring me from the counter, I mean, why not? And so every meal she does this. What happens is they start relating to her differently. So she starts relating to herself differently. Within a few months, she was a different person. She was a normal, kind, sensitive, considerate person. He said she dated after that, she got married, she built a wonderful family, she's a fine person. This is what Beis Hillel argues and says, you could look in the mirror and say you're a narcissist. You could look in the mirror and say you're miserable. You could look in the mirror and say you hate everybody. You could look in the mirror and say I'm a jealous person, I'm an anxious person, I'm a person was vergit nicht, I'm a person who has this, I'm a person who has that, I'm traumatized. I don't exist, I exist too much. Whatever it is, and you know what? You're probably right too. You're right if you say that. Or you could say, Kala Nova Chasuda. What's this ideal life that you're looking for? Be that life. Be the person you're dreaming about in somebody else. Be that person. Be it in thought, in words, in actions. And you know what will happen? That itself will bring out from you that part, because it's there. It's there. Kala Nova Chasuda is real. It's not a fake thing. It's real. Is it covered over? Sure. And the greatest thing that covers it is your thoughts that it doesn't exist. Your thoughts that it doesn't exist, that's what makes sure that it doesn't exist. There was once a couple, the night before the bris, they got into a big fight. Over what? Of course, the name of the baby. They come to the Rav, 3 a.m. Says, what's this? She says, I want my baby's name to be Moshe, after my father. He looks at the husband, and you, says, I want the baby's name to be Moshe. So what's the fight? He says, I want it for my father. So the Rav says, what's the problem? Make Moshe. She says, no. My father-in-law was a mushchus, a roitzeach, a terrorist, an idiot, a ganav, a gazlan, a codependent, alcoholic, gambler, meshugana, insane, Russia, merusha. And sick person. I'm never naming my baby after my father-in-law. And the father says, maybe she's right, I'm not going to argue with my wife about my father, but it's still my father, he's still my father. Oops. What do you do? If you were a rabbi, what do you do? So the big questions the rabbis have to deal with. The rabbi says, I need 10 minutes. Go out. Come back 10 minutes later. He gives a clap. He says, here's the verdict. The name of the baby shall be Moshe. Brilliant. They both scream out, after whom? The rabbi says, for that we have to wait till he grows up. We'll see. He himself will tell us who he was named after. Either we'll see he was named after your father, we'll see he was named after your father. These are choices. Ultimately, you create the image of yourself that you want to be. And the possibilities are endless. You can go into that space. That's what Beis Hillel says. Still, Elu velu divrei Elokim Khayyam. Why? Because sometimes if you ignore Beis Shammai, you can't even begin the work. Sometimes you have to go into certain spaces and deal with darkness because you cannot identify your goodness because there's too much toxicity. And furthermore, even when you can, you always have to have Beis Shammai's view as a reminder that things are going to come up. And don't get depressed. Sometimes people's expectations drive them crazy. It's not the problem, it's the expectation that is not supposed to be a problem. A chassan and a kala could be under their chuppah. Everybody feeds them the Kool-Aid. The Kool-Aid says it's the happiest moment in your life. Right? You remember that? Okay. I'm just trying to bring back sweet memories. If it's not sweet, I apologize. I apologize. Okay? But that's, the chuppah is supposed to be your happiest moment. Engagement is supposed to be flying high. But sometimes under a chuppah, people are full of issues. Full of issues. But the expectation was it's perfect. Perfect. So I'm the only meshugana. So I can't tell anybody. So the rest of my life, I'm the only miserable person. Beis Shammai says, even when there's a lot of joy and a lot of goodness, things could come up. It's all right. Things emerge, shine. You ever go to Great Adventures, they have these games where things pop up and you gotta shoot it down, you know those stuff? Okay, it pops up. Shoot it down, tell it nicely. So what? People have to deal with depression, with other stuff. They emerge. But you identify what it is and you choose the person you're going to be now. So that's why in the background you always have to have Beis Shammai's view. Beis Hillel doesn't tell you deny, repress. That's never healthy. When you deny and repress, you're in for misery because it's going to haunt you. Don't deny and repress. But don't allow toxicity to eliminate the truth of Kala, Noah, Chasuda. That's why there the halacha is also like Beis Hillel. If this is the case, we can see how thousands of years before this argument developed in psychology, you already had it between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel throughout Chazal, throughout the Gemara. In the last century, two divergent views developed in psychology. I'm not going to elaborate on this, but generally you have the view of Dr. Sigmund Freud, whose real name was Shlomo Freud, who died in 1939, versus Dr. Boris Frederick Skinner, who's known as BF, who died in 1990, who wasn't Jewish. Maybe characteristic. Freud is the father of psychoanalysis, and he advocated to dig deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper until we discover all the schmutz. And only then can you extricate yourself from neurosis that people have because of repression. You'll be able to confront the demons. Skinner and more therapists in recent years focused more on behavior, the behavioral approach. Alter your behavior and the inner workings of your psyche will figure themselves out in the process. As Skinner once said, happiness is found in do's and don'ts. Happiness is found in do's and don'ts. This is what I do, this is what I don't do. How I'm feeling about this one and that one and that one. Really? On some level, lahavdil, but in the source of it, you have a Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Now, this is the whole argument about Chanukah. This is the entire argument about Chanukah, and here we'll see how it develops in this argument that we discussed before. The Chashmonaim come into a Beis HaMikdash that is ransacked, soiled, contaminated, which spiritually speaking represents a condition where your system is ransacked, violated, tameh. They find a jug of oil, a little jug of oil, and they light it. They light it. And we commemorate that victory and that miracle and that light every year. But how do we do it? Beis Shammai says, the first night you start with 8. And then you can go down and down and down. And the last night you light 1 candle. And Beis Hillel says the other way around. What's the machlokes? Because on a psychological level, the narrative of Chanukah represents our own Chanukah, our own commitment and dedication to battle those forces within us that eclipse us, that darken purity, integrity, idealism, godliness, goodness. And how do we overcome this darkness and the spiritual or emotional onslaught on our life? So Beis Shammai says, you got to go in with all the tanks. You got to go in with all the ammunition. There's no way. You got to take on the worst of the worst. You got to deal with the crux of the issues. You got to confront it. And therefore, who do you need a lot of light? You need so much light. You need so much energy. You need so much power. You need so much creativity. You need so much honesty. You need so much sacrifice. You need to come in the first night with 8 candles in order to confront all of the darkness and fight it and battle it and cleanse yourself from it. And you know what will happen? The second night, there's already less darkness. So now you can come in with 7 tanks. You don't need 8 tanks. Just look at Sukkos. Sukkos. Maybe open the door. Gewaltig. You need an extraordinary dosage of light in order to confront everything that you have to confront. So the first night of Chanukah, when you're just beginning the process of rekindling your own light after its desecration, you need 8 candles. But every day, the inner evil decreases. So you don't need as much light, as much ammunition as the first day. When you reach the 8th day, now you need 1 flame. 1 flame suffices in order to finish the process of Chanukah. Where do you have such a pattern in Torah? Beis Shammai says, look at Sukkot. Sukkot, we went from 13 to 7, which make up the number 70. 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7 makes up 70. You could trust me. Unless you want to do the calculations yourself. The 70 represent the 70 nations of the world. What's this idea of going down and down and down? The answer is, when we look at the world, there's endless multiplicity. Every nation has its culture, its ego, its territory, its issues, and that's why there's conflicts and wars. Each day of Sukkot, what you're trying to do is, you're trying to banish, to dispel more and more darkness, and therefore automatically there's more unity. So 13 becomes 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Yom HaShmini Atzeres is 1. In the ultimate vision of Ahaya Hashem, L'melech al kol haaretz, Vayom Ohiyeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad, the more Hashem echad is revealed in civilization, the more all the nations become one. Becoming one doesn't mean they're not diverse. Becoming one means they're not threatened by diversity, because God is the author of diversity. So the idea of Sukkot is, I start off with confronting tremendous amount of conflict, and poiches v'hoilech. The resistance becomes less and less and less. Why does the resistance become less? Because the first day, I attacked the Niagara Falls of the toxicity. The second day, I attack symptoms. The third day, I attack further symptoms. And then at the end, I just have that little piece that's left over. 1 candle is enough. Comes Beis Hillel and says, don't start with focusing on darkness. You know why? It's very vicious. And it's very tough, and you can get stuck, and you can get depressed, and you're never going to come out of it, and you have to know how to do it. Let me tell you what to do. Light 1 candle. Light a flame. You say, flame? I don't have any light. I'm full of darkness. I don't have a lot of light. Basil says, I know you don't have a lot of light, but 1 candle you have. You don't have a lot of light. You have 1 candle. Beis Shammai, who's confronting the darkness, has already 8 candles. Beis Hillel says, I know you don't have 8 candles, but 1 candle you could find. 1 little spark of light you can find. Light it up. Make it present. Make it manifest. Breathe it. Live it. Internalize it. Believe in it. Let it cast its glow around you. Let its halo. Let its halo encompass your environment. Hold up that 1 candle, which is surrounded by an enormity of darkness. And you know what will happen? It won't all go away. But a little light dispels a lot of darkness. It'll be dispelled. So tomorrow night, you'll be able to find 2 candles. And the 3rd night, you'll be able to find 3 candles. And the 4th night, more darkness will be dispelled. You'll be able to find 4 candles. And the last night, you'll be able to find 8 candles. A whole different approach. Beis Shammai poiches v'hoilech, Beis Hillel Monsey v'hoilech. So of course Beis Shammai is ideal. Beis Shammai is the perfect model. That's why when Mashiach comes, Allah is like Beis Shammai. Es ruach hatum ha'avim min haaretz. In our world, Beis Shammai is the words of the living God. But the halacha is like Beis Hillel. Don't ignore the negativity, but don't make that your priority. Your priority is to celebrate that you're a kala no v'chasuda. You want to stop being selfish? Don't analyze yourself for years. Do a favor to somebody every day. Do a favor to somebody, and you won't be selfish. No, really I am, and I'm doing it for myself because of this, because I need pleasing, because I need this. Enough, okay? That's all part of your darkness. Nothing is real. Your idealism is your greatest source of paralysis. Don't figure it out. But one thing you have to know, you have to believe that somewhere there's real kindness. If you don't have that, then you'll always defeat yourself. You have to know it's there. You live it, you'll ultimately access it. You say you want to get rid of your fear? What exactly are you afraid of? Making a call to this and this person? Call them! Call them! No, I can't. What are you going to say? What are they going to think? They're going to think I'm right, I'm wrong. They're right, I'm wrong. I didn't speak to them for 20 years. What was going to happen to me and my mother? Make the call. But I'm so scared. What are you scared of? Making the call. So make it. Light a candle. Light a candle. Access that light. I know the darkness is there. Don't get rid of anything. Tell your darkness, Bruchim Habayim B'Shem Hashem. It's a pleasure to have you. Make yourself comfortable in my house, in my life, in my psyche. I know you'll be here for very, very many years. I wish you well, but one thing, you're not going to be given a meal anymore. I'm not going to feed you. I'm not going to build you. I'm not going to worship you. You'll be there. One day you'll be a little hungrier. One day you'll be a little fatter. One day you'll be more satiated. Okay, people have ups and downs. I'm not going to feed you. And when your light starts burning, the darkness decreases. And before you know it, your menorah is shining brightly, filling your home and your life with light. Have a wonderful Chanukah.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.